Welcome! If you want to learn how to do a big bowl like this, keep watching and I will show you. The first step in making a big bowl, or a bowl for that matter, is to pick the clay you want to use. And for a big bowl, I like to use stoneware with a lot of grog. And I'm using this clay that I get from a local supplier, so you probably won't get exactly the same. It's a very nice gray clay with a lot of grog in it. So it's very stable and nice to throw with. So first part is to wedge it up. And for reasons I'm gonna explain very soon, I will wedge it up in 3 pieces. I'm gonna use 10 kilo in total, so about 3.5 kilo each. And I'm gonna use a slam and cut method because to begin with, I kind of need the clay to wake it up a little bit. I need it to be a little more plastic, and that helps when you throw it down on your wedging table. This is a stone that I'm using here, and then you cut it up and slam it together, and cut it up and slam it together a few times. In the end, after I've done that a few times, I do wedge it in a more normal way to just get it completely smooth and secure that there's no bubbles. And now we are ready for the fun part of throwing. Today is one of those rare occasions here in Denmark where it's actually really warm and sunny. So excuse me for not wearing my usual outfit, but I need to dress down for this. To make any kind of pot on the potter's wheel, there are 3 steps. First step is to center the clay. The next step is to open up the clay ball. And the last step is to shape it into the form that you want. That is true for any kind of pot that you do. But when you're doing a really big pot like I'm doing today, the first part, this centering, is the most demanding challenge physically. There are several ways that you can center a big ball of clay. One is just to put it all on the wheel and center it. It's doable. I've been centering up to 10, 15 kilo that way, but it's a lot of work. So if you want to make it a little more easy on yourself, here's a nice trick. Just follow this instruction. For this bowl, I'm gonna use about 10 kilo of clay. And to center 10 kilo of clay is, to be honest, a lot of work. Physically, it's demanding. There are some techniques that you can use to make it a little more easy, but still it's a lot of clay to move around. So an easier way to center that much clay is to do it in portions. So basically you center first one piece, and then you put another piece on top of it, and then you just center that one. You leave the lower part and you sort of massage it together. And then if you need that, you can put a 4th piece or even more pieces until the size of the clay ball you want. In this case, I made 3 pieces out of the 10 kilo clay, so approximately 3.5 kilo each. And 3.5 kilo to me, at least, oh, now I'm pushing things down. 3.5 kilo to me, at least, is not that difficult. I will, as usual, start out with tap centering, and then I'll just center the first part, making it about, 20 centimeter wide, and then I'll put the next section on. I always start out by pushing the clay ball down, because even though I slapped it to the bed, it may not stick perfectly. So I push it down to make sure that it's stick really well. And then the second part is I seal the bottom, because otherwise water can get in under it and release the stickiness. So now this is pretty well centered, and we're ready to add the next ball of clay. Except I just want to make sure that this surface is completely smooth, because we don't want any air to be trapped in here. So something like this. See, now it's completely smooth, and you have to do the same thing with the bowl that you're gonna add. Make sure that it's completely smooth underneath. See here, there was a little bit of a bump. You don't want any air to be trapped there, of course. And then you put this on top of that. I do a bit of tap centering too. It's a little more slippery here because I had wet hands. So if you do that, it's gonna splatter all over you. And now you can center the top part. You don't need to do anything about the lower part because that's already centered. So just gonna push this down to make sure that it sticks well. Now you see it becomes one big clay ball. So now I think this is also well centered. So now it's time to put the last piece on, but again, just gonna even out this. So, like that. We take the last piece, see if I can hit the center. It's a little more messy to tap center when you have wet hands, but I'm gonna take a shower after this anyway. So now we have it almost centered. I'm just gonna maybe make it a little bit wider before we start opening up. So now we're ready to open up the clay ball. I had to take a short break after this centering. It is a lot of work. And opening up the clay ball with this much clay is also more work, of course, than a small clay ball. but it's not as hard on you as it is centering. Centering is the hardest part of dealing with a lot of clay like this. So let's move on with this. But I'm sweating, so my glasses are getting damp. That's better. And opening up a big clay ball is not that different from other, except when you usually use like a index finger or just your thumb, it may not go all the way. I can still start out with my thumbs, but as I get down, I need to move a lot of clay, and I probably need to go with the full strength of my hand. But take your time, don't push it too much. Then you will push it out of shape. And see, I'm going now with my hand instead of just my thumbs, because first of all, my thumbs are not strong enough, but they can also not reach the bottom of this rather big clay ball. And as always, especially when you're dealing with this much clay, support it on the outside, otherwise you're going to push it out of shape. And for this much clay, I can't really just move it all out. So what I'm doing is, when I get a little bit deeper, I'm going to push in my hands like this, and then I'm going to push it up. Push it in, push up. Because that way I only have to push a little bit of clay down at the bottom, and then just move it up. And of course, with this much clay, it can be difficult to see how thick the bottom is. But when we get down, open it up a little bit more. I'm going to use this potter's needle, stick it in to see. I want to keep a relatively thick bottom on this one because I'm going to trim a foot. So I'm probably going to leave maybe a couple of centimeters, something like that. And I constantly make sure that my rim is compressed and is still in shape. Because once it gets too much out of shape, it's really difficult to get it back. And now it's probably too thick, but I just want to check because I want to see how much more I need to push it. Yeah, this is 3 centimeter, maybe almost 4 centimeter. So definitely it needs to be at least half that thickness. And even though I do need a lot of water to keep the growing surface moist. I'm also removing any lakes I have of water down here because I don't want it to suck into the clay. I want the surface to be wet or slippery. So, but I don't want the clay to sort of weaken from soaking in water too long. I'm just going to check again. Yeah, now it's getting closer. So just a little bit more, and then I think we have the right thickness in the bottom. I want to create a shape that is not as shallow as the one I made in the past, but a little more round to contain more because I'm going to use it for fermenting or preparing my vegetables for fermenting. So I need it to be a little more contained than the shallow bowls that I also made. So for that, I need a bit of a wider base. And again, take your time, unless you are a production potter that needs to optimize your hourly rate, and I'm not. And it's much easier and safer to take your time. Now I think we have a very good starting point here. So it's going to be a little more flat in here than for my shallow bowls, but I think this is going to be okay. Have sort of a white base here. Now I just want to make sure that it's still centered and in the shape. I'm going to even out the trimming lines or the throwing lines that I'm obviously making at this point. But I'll take that with a rib at a later stage. Right now I'm just trying to get the basic opening ready. One of my favorite potters, Daniel Meisinger, he talks a lot about setting up your clay. So whatever you're going to do, you're going to take it in steps and you're going to set it up for the next step. And this is what I'm doing here. And I don't have any rush. It takes a little bit of time, but it just makes the next steps so much easier and also increase the likelihood that we don't fail, which I still do a lot, but but it's getting better. So now I think we're pretty much done with the opening and are ready to to do pulling. And here we got like, I don't know how much it is, 6, 7 centimeter of clay. So there's a lot of clay to pull. I'm gonna color in the top a little bit. There are different strategies for how to pull a big bowl like this. Some potters go out like this. Some potters even shape the entire width right away. I think that's very difficult, very risky, because once it gets out there, the force of the wheel will push it out even further and you can't get it back in. So I always like to keep it very narrow to begin with, and then I lay it out in the shape that I want. I think that's a little more safe way to do it. So I'm going to push in the rim a little bit before we start the pulling. And again, I'm going to push down the rim, and then I'm going to compress it and make sure that it's still even. And down here, of course, we have a lot of clay. I'm slowly going to move some of that up. One thing, when you have to move a lot of clay from the bottom and up, you need to push in a lot. But take your time, push in until it's sort of stabilized, and then only after that, start pushing it up. Because if the push in the bottom is not stable enough, when you start pulling, you're going to get an uneven pull. So you're not going to pull clay from all around the pot. And of course, that's what you want. So take your time when you push in the bottom. Also, leave enough clay at the top, because you're going to lay it out, and when you lay out the pot, it's going to be thinner, so you don't want to leave it too thin up there. A problem that I often have is when I pull up, I try and pull as much from the bottom as possible, but then as you go up, it becomes easier and easier. So it becomes thinner and thinner, which is okay. But then suddenly when I get to this point, I'm like, oh, I have to leave some clay for the top, and then I let it go thick. The problem with this is I often end up with this part being too thin, much thinner than what is below and what is on top. And that makes it very weak here, and very more likely to collapse on me. So you got to make sure that, of course, you will have more clay in the bottom. You need that to support a big bowl like this, but you want it to be an equal distribution, not something, like that, if you get the point. Also remember that when you start laying out your pot, it will lower in height. So you need a lot more height than what you are aiming for in the end. Slowly getting there. Still have a bit too much clay down here. And what I'm doing now is I'm going through the different parts of the wall to make sure that it is as evenly in thickness as possible. I don't know, I always end up with some spots that are a little too thin or a little too thick, usually the latter. And I just want to make sure that I have a wall that is relatively even. If you are getting tired on the way, and or maybe the clay is getting too soft because of all the water splashing, you can leave it and continue throwing in an hour or two. Of course, depending on the weather. Now it's warm today, so probably wouldn't leave it too long. But in case it's too warm, you can also cover it with plastic, and it will just firm up a little bit. It will actually make it easier to finish the shaping. I may actually end up doing that when we get to the final width. And now I'm going to take some of the throwing marks, going to start from the top, just going down, and I'm also going to remove some of the slip this way. I know that there's potters that say you can only go from the top down, and some potters do it from the bottom up, which is just a proof that there are many ways to do the same things. But at this stage, I like to start out from the top. I think it's a little more stable and less likely to get out of shape when I do that. So I'm just going to do it like that. I think that completed step 2, the pulling. I don't think I'm going to pull any more out of it because it is not thin. Of course, it's a big pot, but thin enough for me. So I'm just going to let it spin for a few minutes, have a cup of coffee or something. Just let it spin really slowly and watch out you don't accidentally hit the pedal and have it throw off, spin off your wheel. So I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Now I'm ready to continue with the last step, the shaping of the bowl. Shaping is the least physical intensive part of the work, but it's also the most sensitive part of it. This is where you make it or break it. So all the work you put into wedging, centering, and opening and pulling is now gonna stand the test. So please be very careful when you do this, because if you do mistakes here, well, it will all collapse. You can wedge it up again and do another pot, but you put in so much work at this point that please take it easy. As I'm aiming for a shape that instead of the very wide and shallow bowls, more like platter bowl or something, I'm going for a more closed form, like a traditional bowl, just bigger, to be able to contain a lot of vegetables that I mix up for my fermenting. And so to do that, I, again, there are different techniques for doing that, but I like to start out by expanding the top and then following up with the bottom and doing that in steps, not the whole thing at once, but in small steps. And at this point, I'm trying to keep it as little wet as possible because now we need the string. So I will start out by laying out the top a little bit. But of course, you still need enough moist not to hang on to the clay. You need to reduce the friction. And make sure that you don't. Now it's getting difficult to reach my bucket. I should have put it on the other side, maybe. Gotta make sure that you don't accidentally stick to a dry part of your pot, because that can really push it out of shape. And the surface of the pot is getting bigger and bigger, so it does require some moist to do that. So now we got the top laid out a little bit. Now I put the camera up so you can see what I'm doing inside, which of course means you can't really see the outside. But right now it's wide on the outside, but still very narrow on the inside. So now I need to move the lower part out as well. And for that, I often use a rib. And I found this shape. You can have a wooden rib or plastic rib, but this is like a semi-soft one from Mud Tools. But the shape, it's a very good shape for bowls. So I'm just going to slowly use that. And again, I'm going to start from the top and work my way down. And the tricky part here is that when you do a pull, you have to use a lot of force in the button and then release the force as you go up. Of course, it's opposite when you expand. You push a lot down here and then slowly, or the other way, very light here, and push more and more as you go down. And still, I'm trying to maintain a circular form. As you can see now, there's very little wobbling. There will be some wobbling in the end, but the more you can keep it in the right shape at this point, the better it's going to be in the end. So now I'm ready to push it out a little bit more. And again, just gonna make sure that it's well lubricated. Now, with this sort of shape, I'm trying, of course, to still have a continuous and even flow, and it's very close to being perfect in this case, but what you very often get is what some people refer to as a beginner's shoulder right here, that it's bulbing out a little bit. And that's because you have a lot of clay down here to support, and it's difficult to push that out without distorting the pot. Now, in this case, it's actually not that bad. I can maybe push it out a little bit more, but in case you're still left with a little bit of a shoulder here, you can trim that away. I know some potters will say you should not trim the inside of a bowl. I don't care. If it works, it works, and it definitely does work. And so don't be too stressed about that beginner's shoulder. Try and get the shape and the evenness of the walls as good as you can. And that's all you can do. I think we're getting very close now to what I was aiming for. The last thing I'm going to do is use a piece of leather, chamois, I think it's called, chamois, to smoothen out the rim. I know some of this can also be done in the trimming, but I found that doing it this way just makes a nicer rim. That's it. Just gonna take away any drops of water. And I think that's it. That was a 10 kilo, was that 20 pound, just about that, 25 pound bowl. I'm gonna trim it in a couple of days. I'm gonna put it aside, I'm gonna cover it in plastic to let it dry a little bit slower. Because what I found is that if you let this dry too fast, it warps more. So I have plenty of time. Gonna throw a few more like this, and then I'm gonna trim them. But that's gonna be for another video. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something from it, and I hope that it inspires you to make things bigger. I do think it's fun, and in this case, very useful for what I need. So if you did enjoy, please subscribe, share, write a comment, and come back again next week. I usually have a new video coming up every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central European Time, unless it's on a vacation or on my way or something happens. But I have also a lot of videos in the archive. Please scroll through. There's hundreds of videos now. So anyway, I'll go outside and enjoy the summer. So see you soon, and have a great day.